start recording. So that creates a raw recording file on my computer that I can put on YouTube later. It's using 2% of the CPU or something right now, 1 to 2%. So that's pretty reasonable. Here we go. Okay. So what we're doing tonight. Okay, so the last time we were talking, let me just bring across a project. The last time we were talking, I was trying to get input actions in. Yes, I think probably to up the volume, I need to first bring the microphone, probably need to speak more into the microphone. I'm surprised that it's quieter than last time. It should be very similar. How's that? Is that better? And I can also increase it here. We'll just do this a bit more advanced audio properties. Problem is if it's too loud, you get the humming, which is annoying. Just always, these streams always start with worrying about microphone volume. Sorry about that. Yeah, it's touching the yellow a bit. I need to lean right in if I want it to really touch. Anyway, probably still too quiet. Let me make it louder again. Come on, more volume. Okay. That's pretty good. I think we can live with that. You can listen to the roar of my voice. Anyway, hopefully it's not too disruptive to your work, whatever it may be. I hope you're doing something as well while you watch. There are a variety of videos on YouTube. If you look under me, I'm Tom Lees. If you look under me on YouTube, you'll find I've got a variety of these videos from the past. If I look at my own channel and don't focus too much on my own history, because that would be embarrassing. Let's see what we've got here. History. It's not like my subscriptions or anything bad. Oops, that's not what I meant to show you. It's funny how that happened. I better not show you my history. Clicks history. Okay, that wasn't smart. It's all Path of Exile stuff. That's the spoiler. Okay. I've been putting these streams on YouTube. If you want to see lots and lots of hours of me recording videos about what we've been doing, mostly done networking so far. A demonstration of the game we've got, which is, in fact, I should be able to run it right now. So let's just run it. Run the server. So what we've got is a game written in Rust and Godot. Godot's like an engine like Unity, and here you see a server, a networking server that's running, and it's waiting for UDP connections. If we run the game, so here's the game just compiling. It's compiling like a DLL that gets loaded from Godot, and that talks to the server, and you can build spaceships, right, and fly them around. If the server will compile. So it looks like the server doesn't want to compile. Let's have a look at why. That's the first thing we're going to fix. The reason why is because I've been working on inputs. I thought I'd already solved this problem, but the first thing I'm going to do is to make it compile. So let's get started on that, and then you'll get to a demo. I could, of course, go into Git and roll back to old code. Once I've got the input stuff working, I'll demonstrate where we are now. There's a whole bunch of stuff you can do in the game that's not synchronized to the server, and therefore other clients can't see it. Specifically, moving your character isn't synchronized. Building is. And soon you're going to be able to move your spaceship. That's not synchronized yet either. Drinking noises, burping, all that sound. That's all part of the pleasure of streaming, I guess. A cheap microphone, you'll figure it out. Let's just increase the font size real quick, because I can't stand large fonts, and then you can't read small fonts. So, settings, font, put it up to 16. Great. Now I can't see anything, but that's okay. And we're going to go through this. The problems we have right now are specifically in a crate that I used to connect between Godot and Rust. I call it SG Core. In this bridge code, I wrote some new code to do the input mapping, and there's lots of problems in here. In Star World Link, which is the main map between Rust and Godot. Let's have a look through this. So, Star World Link is this object that gets created by Godot and attached to a node. It creates children. And down in here in the physics process, it happens at a 60 Hertz time step. We're also capturing the input from the user. So here we are calling this function called collect input, which is new. Collect input's just down here. It creates a player input object, and it populates it with data. So, what are the problems? Cannot import player input. So I obviously, I think, so there's a player input struct. I see. So the problem here is pretty simple. In actions, I've got a public use to like remap where these things come from. I need to add this one to here. It was here last time I checked. Okay. Put that there. That should fix this top problem. Cannot find type button mask. So button mask is a type for inside action. Did I expose this? I think I didn't expose it. Button mask is basically just a wrapper around U32 to make it easier and clearer what I have. Let me just close that. I need to make sure that this is public, and then I need to go back to actions. I'm also going to map this. So in my file structure, actions contains the player input file. There's player input module, so it's like a sub module, but I remap the name so it moves to the parent level of actions, and then that means that up here I just have to say simulation actions and the things I want. So I also need this object called button mask I just added. There's a Medium article on the general layout of my file structure, but basically SGCore is the mapping. And then if we go down here, we've got SG simulation, which is where this is. SG simulation contains the game simulation. And the game simulation is used by both SGCore, but it's also used by these other modules here. So simulation doesn't understand networking, doesn't understand Godot. It's very simple, it's very raw, and that's like great. It's like a little board game that has moves, if you like. And this ticking, this moving is the core to the way the networking works. Something called lockstep. We're going to do prediction eventually. Okay, button mask. Okay, so I think we'll probably find I've solved most of the problems. I'm starting a batch file that I've got the link for my batch file on the other screen there. So every time I run, I have to move the window over here again. If I was doing this a lot of times, I might find a better way of doing it to do it faster. Okay, Star Wars link RS43. 43 is here. It doesn't like the way I was initializing that to button mask, which is surprising. Button mask. I hadn't considered that to be a problem. Why is it doing that? Because usually you can get away with just doing that. It's like it hasn't been found or something. Or is there something else that means that the button mask comes from? It's referring to this. I don't understand why over here I can say button mask with round brackets, and here I have to use curly brackets. That's interesting. Is that going to work? Or is it's not public? Do I need to put a pub? Do I need to put a pub here? Is that why it's not working? I'm recompiling the server, but that's not actually what I wanted to do. I wanted to rerun the game. The fun of fixing compile issues. Just run it again and again. Okay, so now it's complaining that I put curly braces. This is weirding me out, man. I'm sorry, it's just so boring. Let's see. I've probably missed something. Last button mask is a button mask. It should be able to set it to 0. Unless I need to put something like a pub here. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to do that. If I had to guess, it would be that pub that's causing the problem. At some point, I'll have to look at documentation, but whoever does that. Yeah, the problem seems to have gone away. So it must have been that I hadn't put a pub here, so anything outside this module probably couldn't reach inside this and access the member. So that's probably what was wrong. Star Wars link 107. Okay, this is where we build these button mask entities. So it's just a U32. It's just a number with 32 bits in it. And then for each button that's being held down, we're going to set one of those bits true. The first bit, the second bit. This is actually the third bit. And this is the fourth bit. But the way bits and numbers work, you know, if you're a programmer, that makes sense. If you're not a programmer, it's probably a bit complex to explain right now. But this 8 here represents the fourth bit, and then further down it's the fifth bit, sixth bit, seventh, eighth, and then down here you can see these ones as well. And this is a representation of hexadecimal, which is nice, like it looks nice. this 1, 2, 4, 8 pattern, whereas in decimal that would be a messy. That would be 1, 2, 1, 2, 4, 8, and then here this one would be 16, which still is actually 16, but it's not written 1, 6, it's written 1, 0 with an X. Anyway, babble. 32, 64, 128, 256, 512. Helper mod. Okay. What did I put in here? So inside the core module, I've got bridge, which contains the stuff that is directly with Godot, and corresponds to nodes in Godot's scene tree. Helper contains other code, and this other code in this case is I obviously haven't imported. It's complaining that I haven't imported button mask. So that's a pretty simple problem to fix. So I go in here, I created a function build button mask, and it scans through a list of key binding strings. So I'll just put this over here for a second, and we'll open up this constant key binding strings. So it's going to go through each of these different strings. In fact, that's something else we have to do. We have to go and tell Godot about these strings, so it actually puts them in as actions that we can poll. It has this list of strings, and on the left hand side these are the numbers. Remember, 1, this one here is 1, that's 2, 4, 8. Has to go through and put them in a mask. Anyway, key binding strings. So for each of those we're going to set the relevant bit in the mask. We have to import this. The C-line does a lot of that work for me. Let's run this again. Oops, once again I keep pushing the shortcut keys to run, and I'm just restarting the server, not running the game compile. I might just change this compile option so that it's running the core, building the core, and since building the core is the thing I care about, and so now the errors you saw before in the batch file are going to show up here, and then I can use my key bindings to save time. Let me just put this so that I can still see the chat window. There we go. Build button mask is not in the scope, and the reason why is because it's in the helpers, but I can't. The helper probably is marked as being private. Yes, I need to put a pub here to make this function public. This is all red, probably because it's not returning a button mask, so I need to write that I want buttons to come out here. And this needs to be imported now. Why is that red? Self. You cannot move. So, well, I want to use a clone. Do I want to use a clone of it? I'm surprised that it's trying to. Sometimes Rust is a bit strange about that. Okay. Cannot find client. So I just had to tell Rust that I want to make a copy of it rather than straight up. I guess copy isn't defined. In fact, a better way to solve that problem is to go back to here. So at this location, it thought that I wanted to move the variable, but if I go into button mask and I tell button mask to define something called copy, it would do that automatically for me, so I don't have to worry about it again, which is very cheap for a U32. It's not like it's a complicated structure, so copying it costs nothing. It's just going to be in a register anyway. It's cheaper to copy it than to pass it around by reference. Okay, client do tick. I have a habit of frowning when I'm concentrating, even if I'm happy. So smile. No field client on here. Unknown field. Yeah. So problem here is I've got this, even though it looks like it's on a different line. As far as I've left this unfinished with no curly brace, it doesn't matter that there's a carriage return here. What was I trying to achieve here? I think I was halfway through a thought, which was I needed to tell the sector about my new input. What I wanted to do, and I will do this later, but what I wanted to do was to send a message into the sector to say, we've done some input so that we can move a spaceship or something similar. Let's not worry about that right now. No function or associated item named new found for type. So I thought we had player input had a new impl. But I'm probably thinking about set player input, which is the actual action I want. So what we'll do is we'll take the new, we'll make one for player input real quick. So so there's two data structures. One of them represents what the user's trying to do, and the second one contains that, and it's called an action. It's going to change the world based on that. So just like you want to change the world based on your input, set player input wants to change the world on your behalf, like move your spaceship or something. If you do want to change the world based on your input, then I suggest that you actually get started and do something cool. Like make a computer game with Rust and Godot. I've got a tutorial on it. You should try it. Just search for Rust Godot tutorial. I'm sure you'll probably find my one. Since it is like the only tutorial on the subject, really. Good to be in first. Feel free to make a second tutorial, by the way. Here we go. So the game we're making is called The Recall Singularity, and it's going to be a blend of awesome factory games that I probably shouldn't name for copyright reasons, and awesome space games that I also shouldn't probably name for copyright reasons. But if you like it and it's in space, and you wish you could modify what was inside your spaceship, or you like it but it's on land and you wish it was in space, you probably want to play my game, which is going to have both. But unfortunately, it's going to be a long wait. I'm a bit sad about that too. I wish it was a short wait, but it's not going to be that way. Making games takes a long time. Oh well, such is life. Okay, so now we've defined this new function, player input new, put it in there. We've made one of these things. Later on, we're going to put it in an action and send it to the server. Okay, it's compiling. So yeah, people ask me what I'm working on, and I tell them I'm making a space game, a factory space game. And I explained to them about like space stations and docking and cargoes and all sorts of other good stuff, and how amazing it's going to be and how awesome, and you'll be able to inhabit the space stations and plant plants and, you know, live on beds and make things and chew up asteroids and refine them and all sorts of cool space ideas. And then they're like, how long is that going to take? I'm like, well, probably get a prototype out in 1 or 2 years, and probably the whole game to my idea of what it should be will be 5 years away. And they're like, oh, that's a long time. I'm like, yes it is. You know, my kids will be growing up and moving out by the time that I'm actually, you know, could call this finished. But that's just how long anything like this takes, unfortunately. But I really hope I can put up something really simple out soon. It doesn't like the types I've chosen. Current mask. What is current mask? It builds a button mask, and we got self last button mask, which is also a button mask. I thought have I not defined? I haven't defined XOR. Okay, cool. So they don't work on type button mask. Let's go have a look at this. So you see there's a bit OR for button mask. Let's try a bit XOR. XOR. Not XIR. And then down here, I guess I have to put an XOR here, and then XOR is a hat symbol. So what this means is if a bit is set in this right hand side, we're going to swap all the bits on the left hand side. It's kind of like it chooses finds where the bits are different. And the reason why this is useful is it will point out which buttons have suddenly changed from one frame to the next, from being pushed to not pushed, in a very simple piece of mathematics, which is really useful. It's one of the main bit operations that one uses all the time when you're doing cool bit stuff. In firmware, when you're writing code for like microcontrollers, you use this stuff a lot, bit operations like this. XOR, again, is particularly useful for looking for edges. So if you're trying to, you know, detect buttons, hardware buttons, XOR is your friend. There's action pressed. Go.string. What's wrong with it? Okay. It expects me to pass it by reference. Well, I'm happy to do that. Cannot figure out how to... And we haven't actually done the in-place XOR OR operation. So the easiest way to solve that problem is just to not define it and use buttons. Or if I get pissed off, I'll just do it by hand later. And now it's complaining that the mask, probably because the mask is a reference. Yeah, we need to dereference this pointer. Why am I using a reference? Probably don't have an option. Yeah. So we're marching a pointer through here. So when we get this, it's basically a pointer. So we need to down here turn it from a pointer to the actual value with a star. Okay. I don't know. You viewer. I don't know how advanced you are at Rust. So if I tell you something you already know, just assume I'm talking to someone different. And if I tell you something you don't know, or I miss something, you just tell me in chat. If you're here now, if you're watching the YouTube, you still tell me in chat. It just takes a lot longer for me to respond via text. Okay. Mismatch types. Expected a Godot.string. Oh. I thought I was going to pass it by value, and I put it by reference, and now I need to put a star, which is going to take it. So we're actually going to consume the string. The string gets moved into this function, which is interesting. I could have copied it, I guess. That makes a lot of sense. So we're basically passing ownership of the string into this isActionPressed function, and it will get rid of the string when it's done, which kind of makes sense, rather than cloning it and yeah, blah blah blah. Unused variable input. Let me. I want to lean back a bit, but then the microphone is up here. It's going to be very loud. Let's turn this off. Hopefully it wasn't too loud for you guys when I moved that, and all that clicking, popping in your ear. Sorry about that. I probably should have dipped the volume. It'll be fine. Okay. I'm sorry. Input, collect input. So player input. This returns the input. And it's just pointing out that we've created this, but we're not doing anything with it. So we put an underscore here just to acknowledge that this variable is completely useless for now. In fact, let's not bother with the warnings. Okay, self. Can't borrow it more than once at a time. This is where we get to the more interesting errors. So once it compiles, this is when you get the borrow checker starting to complain. So the reason why this is a problem is collect input is actually modifying self so that it can change the button mask here and remember between different frames what the button mask was so it can detect edges. So we're going to not worry too much about that. What are we doing? So we're getting the client is mutable here. Why do we need the client to be mutable? So we can do tick. So we don't actually need this to be inside the if statement. We can just put it up here. We don't, we can just get the input in either case. And then by the time we get down to here, input is basically copied. That'll actually just solve the problem. Cannot move out of Godot.string, which is behind a shared reference. Is ActionPressed Godot.string is behind a shared reference. Okay. That's weird. Oh, I know what's wrong. Why did I put a reference, an ampersand symbol there? I don't understand why I did that. We'll get rid of it, and we'll get rid of it from here, and the problem will go away. Great. Okay, so finally, are you ready to see my game? I warn you, it's still in early stages, so prepare to be over and underwhelmed simultaneously. I bet you're excited to see something in space. Wow, that thing's really going. Oh, I know what's going on. It's catching up with the server. So the server's been running a while, so now the client is jumping ahead 200 ticks at a time to try and catch up with the server. And it's caught up. So the client will be lagging now. That's another problem I need to fix later on. So if I have a look, the ship's gone. The ships are currently wandering, and it's a very plain looking ship, but it's just because the client didn't bother to draw the walls, which is really interesting. I haven't seen that one before. I wonder if that's going to stick around. But anyway, if I build some walls, if I build using floor build. Yeah. This is really odd. Okay. Well, let's start by restarting the server. So, remember we ran the server earlier when I was trying to compile it? So we'll quit that. Terminate it. Run running the server. I don't need to run it from here anymore. I could have, of course, run it from my batch file that's on the other side. And then we'll run the game again. Yeah, I should have done the batch file way. This client's the one I'm going to call it. That's the old client. So here's the new client. That's much more what I was expecting to see. So you got your two spaceships, and they're moving because I've programmed the server to start off with them moving at initial velocity. One's moving towards us, one's moving away, and I can move my character with my cursor keys. So, you know, as I push the cursor keys on the keyboard here, you can see my characters moving around the screen. Now, this is not networked. So if I run, there's a lot in the game that is networked, but at the moment the movement of the player is not, and so the goal of tonight is to synchronize that player movement as well. There's a part of it I just realized, which is that the player is completely controlled by Godot code right now. So we're going to have to change that. So see this little player here on this screen. So most other things about the game are actually duplicated between these two. So if I was to build a building on here, you can't see it hovering, but when I place it, you can see it up here onto the screen over here. That's really interesting. You can only see it on that screen. You can't see us. You can't see our own buildings appearing on it. Wow, making games is really interesting. You get a new bug every day. Only the other client can see them. Wow, cool. Okay, that was unexpected. I can build the floor like this. Only other client can see that. There's something's going on with this client. It's not updating itself. I bet this client, when it does its own thing, it can see its own things happening. Let's try. Yeah. So the one here, everything is not synchronizing on that screen for some reason. New and exciting bugs. Okay. Let's not worry about that for now. Yeah, everything normal, all stuffed up. Oh well. Okay. Game plan time. What's the next thing? That's the next thing to worry about. Well, the very first thing I want to do is make sure that the input action I'm creating. I don't even have these inputs being mapped. If I push the buttons, they're not going out. If I have them on the server, I can't see what they are. So one thing I could do is, if I receive a button press, I just print out what the button press is. So let's start with that, hey? So I'll move the server. I was going to move the server away. First thing I'm going to do is send these actions to the server. They're going to contain the buttons, and we're going to be able to see the masks. That'll be a good start. Okay? Okay. I'm going to be very vain for just a second. I'm going to see if anyone is watching, because I'm a streamer. That's what we do, right? I think. I don't know. I think that's what we do. And we go, if you guys are watching, then I feel good. And if you guys are not watching, then I feel really bad. And if there's lots of people watching, then I feel freaked out. Yeah, there's some people watching. Hey. Okay, that was enough looking into the abyss. Okay, back into the trip into embarrassment with me. Let's go. So, actions contain... where are we? Actions contain an enumerator. These are the 4 different actions I currently have. So you saw me place something, that console, that was using a place module action. There's also remove, I didn't show you that. There was adjust floor, which is how you create and remove floors. And there's player input, which is the one we're working on right now. These are the things that get sent over the network to define what a player is doing. And each one of them, the way I've written my game, these end up in a queue, and eventually they will execute this function called apply. They'll be passed a world. And this will happen on both client and server at the same time. So what we're going to do in here is we're going to basically do nothing. We're just going to comment that out, and we're going to write with a simple print line. We're going to write basically our self. So self.input will do. And you'll recall that self.input is that, well, I might just write all of ourselves actually. We can't put that first. We need to actually... we're executing a set player input. We might as well not, we're going to say set player input apply That's the name of this class, remember? And we've got self.input is the one thing I care about. So we'll put that here. And we're going to use a debug feature functionality, so that's : ? And the other thing I want is going to be the other member of this class. The other member of this class is not what the player is pressing, but remembering where the player is. I call it inhabits. So the player inhabits different objects in the game. So I think it's in the top of the same file. It is. So the player could be a pilot, so they could be flying a ship. They could be somehow controlling a module of the ship. I'm kind of imagining guns and stuff, you know, or chests, or I'm not sure what they're going to be able to inhabit other than ships inside a module, inside a ship yet, but I'm sure I'll figure it out soon enough. Or they could be controlling their own personal character. So, you know, when you inhabit a console, your character stays in one place at the console, you know. So if you're a ship pilot and you push keys, then you're going to move the ship. And on the server, I want to basically constantly check that the client and server agree about what the person's controlling. Which might also mean that in the case of packet loss, that the player will occasionally jump to something that the player thought it was controlling it, the server didn't know. Finally, the player tells the server what it's trying to do, and the server goes, "Should I let you jump there as if you were there all along?" And then it goes, "Yeah, okay." Or it might say, "No, you're not there. You're somewhere else. You're cheating. You're a cheat." I'm not saying you're a cheat, but the player is a cheat. Or are you a cheat? We shall see. Here we go. So we've got the input. What's the other thing we want? The inhabits, that's right. Now the debug output will actually write out the word inhabits or the word inputs, so I won't have to remember what the order is. Otherwise I'd put something in the string to specify which one was which and remind myself. So the goal of this line is that we're going to see this come out on the console once the action makes it to the server. Now, in order to send it to the server, I have a neat little system. So I'm going to just simplify things a bit by closing most things. So we'll close others, and over here in the star world link, we're going to close others here too. These are the two main files we're going to be working with on the left hand side. Star world link is the one that connects to Godot. I might just quickly launch Godot to give you a visual representation of what's going on. So you've already seen the game. It's just loading. Just hold on a second. You might notice that there's a little next to me. There's a little thumbnail that shows you a general idea of what's on that screen, so you know. Okay. By the way, this background, this grass, is just there for the lighting. So I've got a space background that looks like this, and that's what you see when you look at the game. And these different layers give this idea of depth. That does it, you know, there is actually something going on. And then the 3D scene mostly stays where this plane is on top. And then the camera is on a slant, so you see where the camera is relative to the origin. So that's how everything's set up. And there's this node here called ships. And the ships node contains a script. So it's this 3D, the script here, this library, SG Core. Click on this, you can see exactly what it is. Hold on, let me just remind myself how this works, because it's been a little while since I last looked at this. Entry. I know there's something here I should be looking for, but I can't remember where it is. There should be the name. Oh, it was really obvious. This name here is important. So this tells Godot where to find the DLL. So you'll find the DLL details are here. And this is the name of the class it's going to launch. So that name matches the name here. Now, if you want to set this up for yourself, you should view my tutorial. So, you know, Google all the things. If you just Google go.rust, you'll find my tutorial most likely. Recall Singularity, again, it's the name of this game we're working on. I probably should have, did I write that in? I don't know if I wrote this where you found my link. Anyway, so that's how we create the class. So this class that I just showed you embodies this node on the tree. And what it does is it creates its children little spaceships. And those spaceships have this class, this ship link in them. And they have a whole bunch of stuff like lighting, and they make tiles and so on. So 60 times a second, this physics process is called, and it gets a sector and does a network tick with it, which is what moves things and keeps them up to sync with the sector. And I'm pretty sure we had the input. That's right, here's the input. Remember, we just put this outside the loop? This input we're going to put into the sector. We're not going to put it anywhere in the sector though. The sector, so let's load the sector. So sector is this class. It's quite complicated. I'm going to go through really fast because I want to focus on the main thing, which is inside the sector there's a concept of worlds, right? So a sector has worlds. There's one world which is special, which is called the ship world, and the star world. The star world. And there's a number which are called production floors. Each ship is itself a production floor. So the ship world contains, like, here's where the ships are. And then the production floors are, here's what's inside each ship. So we've got a dictionary that maps the ID to something called a world sync. And I'm going to come back to these things. I'm going to go really fast. So world sync, world sync contains inside of it something called a sync world. Where are we? A lock world. World sync contains a lock world. I'm not happy with this naming. Lock world contains inside of that something just called world. Now if you want to know what world is and how that works, it's using a library called specs. And so a world contains components and objects, entities. So it contains entities which have components. And specs is something called an ECS. So it's too much to explain, just Google that. Specs, Rust specs, and you'll get the specifications for a computer game, which is really annoying. You might also need ECS. So ECS Rust specs usually finds it. So the sector, we want to get from the sector the particular world. Once we get the world, we can send it events. Let me just make this a bit smaller. And which one is get world? So I want to get the relevant lock world. There's a constant here for the star world. I think it mustn't be in this module. I can't remember where I put that one. There's a space world. Yep, that one. That definition, world 0, is special, and it contains for the sector a list of where all the spaceships are. I was wondering about making that a special thing, like it's its own class, but it turns out that it was just the same class as everything else, because I'm still wanting to keep a specs world and sync across multiple clients and servers, so it seemed kind of silly to like make a whole class structure just for that when it's really just the same thing. The main difference is that the space world link is more real time. The other one, I don't need it to be real time. It doesn't matter if crates on a factory lag slightly behind the client and don't have prediction, but the movement of a player, they will notice very fast if that is not predicted. Right now there's no prediction, but I'm just planning ahead. Okay, so we have a sector, and we want to get the world, so we want to go get world. We're going to need the mutable world because we're going to change it, and we don't actually need to change it. It's quite neat the way this works. So we're going to get the world. The world we wish to get is the star world link one, that one there. So space world ID, that's the world we want. Once we have the world, it's a lock world. There's something in here, so let me just collapse this one as well. And there's events. Instructions. This world instruction queue. Okay. There's a lot of things you can tell worlds to do. You ready for the full list? Here we go. You can tell it to perform an action. That's all you can tell it to do. And those actions are the list I told you earlier. So we're going to... I'm planning ahead here. I assume I'm going to come up with more things than this. But it might turn out that all things I want synchronized, all things end up being actions. If that becomes the case, I'll refactor at that point. So we want to get instructions. That does not require a mutable copy of self, which is why we don't need to use get world mute. But the instructions is this thing called a world instruction queue, which is using a pointer to an array queue, and array queues from Crossbeam, they're actually a multi-threaded concept. We can push things into these things from multiple threads without having mutable access, and it's always safe. And then in any thread you can pop them off again. So that's Crossbeam, and it's quite a useful tool. And so in this case, we can just push our action straight onto this queue, which is what we're going to do. Now, let me just remind myself, I've just broken this by putting a C in. I've got an annoying keyboard that has a C key. If you just even rest your finger on the C key, it will type it in. So you'll see a lot of C's turn up in my code over time that I didn't want to be there. You'll just, yeah, I tend to seize up. Crossbeam, Rust. I'm a dad, I've got 3 kids, so, you know, get a lot of dad jokes as well. Hope you don't mind. Okay. Crossbeam. I didn't mean to go to this, I mean to go to the, but it's array queue is the one I was using. I mean to go to the documentation, but it's taking me there anyway. So if you have a look at array queue, and I'm mostly just reminding myself that there is actually a push function. So there it is, it returns a result. So if we try and push an action and the queue is full, I moved the documentation to where I wanted it to be, but you can't read it there. If the queue is already full, then it's going to return an error. I'm going to be evil and ignore that error. Just you watch me go. So what are we doing? We've got an input. That's what the player's doing. We want to tell the server about it. So first we're going to get the queue of instructions. So so let instructions equal this, get instructions, and then we're going to push. It was push. I've got to distrust myself on this one. We're going to push to instructions a new action. Now we go back to player input. And we wanted in set player input, we added another new function. I don't know why it doesn't take an input, because it should. So I'll just make it take an input called input. Takes the player input as input. Which one of those? So set player input new input, like so. So that's what we're going to push to the server. And if everything goes well, we should start seeing that working. Let's just try it out. So here's our old server. We're going to run that. We're going to run that again. So run server. I've told CLine that I only want one version of the server running. So every time I try and run it when it's already running, it'll pop up a dialog, and it'll ask me, "Did you want to run another one, or do you just want to stop the one you had?" So that's going. So let's run a copy of the game. Okay, so it's just complained. The reason why it's complained is because I've got an option, right? This get world, it might turn out that there isn't actually a world with that ID, so I return an option that might be none. So what I want to do is I want to say, if there's no world, I want the answer instructions to be none. Anyway, just watch. So this will be world. And so with world, we want to call world.getInstructions. World.getInstructions might also return none. And in that case, it would return none if we never actually created a queue of instructions to write to. I'm going to ignore that problem. So here, instructions might still be none. What we're going to do here is, if it is, we're going to do nothing with the inputs. We're going to ignore the inputs. So we'll say, if we did get inputs, if we did get an instructions queue, if it's some instructions equals instructions, I need to put a word let here, so I'm creating a new variable, then we're going to do this. And I've found that in debuggers that if the same name, if I use this name and that name are the same, debuggers don't like that. It's really hard to debug this code. So I'll just rename this one instructions opt for optional, and that's complaining. And it's complaining because I need to actually remember how I showed you the incredibly wide list of options. that I could put here into instructions. So remember, here's a list, perform action. That's the one option I could have. Oh, there I typed C in again. Sorry. I need to actually say it here. So I want a world instruction, which is here, and I want perform action, and then stop and rerun. Why is it complaining about that? Oh, and I have to do the same annoying piece of gymnastics here as well. I'm just wondering, in my own head, I'm wondering if I want to start defining a from instruction for all these different things so that I don't have to worry about typing it all out, but it's probably a distraction right now. I could make some nice conversions so I don't need so much like typing here, but it's only relevant if I'm going to type it in a bunch of times. I'm probably not going to be typing this in very often, these particular words. I'll probably type in other words a bunch of times. Okay, so into the instructions, we're going to say we want to pass an action. What action? We're passing a player input action. Okay, what data? The data is a set player input structure. Okay, what input does that structure contain? This input. And then if we look at the new function, we'll find out that it defaults to inhabits being a player avatar at a particular location. So that's not ideal either. We're going to have to expose the inhabits, and I'd like to move this constant out into this code so that way it's more obvious. So let's just quickly write that in. I'm just trying to figure out if I want a new function. I probably still do. Okay. I'm typing in inhabits. What is the type of inhabits? It's up to find out here. Player input, set player input, inhabits, is of type inhabits, which is at a numerator saying where the player currently is. Are they in a spaceship? Are they walking around? Now this here is a constant that represents an inhabits. Now in Rust I could write inhabits, like I could write that I want the structure to have that variable name here takes the value from this argument, but if you just delete that, it will assume that the structure variable name is the same as the local variable name, so say it's from typing, and it will actually warn you if you don't do that. So it seems silly to put that on multiple lines now that it's so simple. And then Rust returns the last line in the function, so that gets returned. It's very rusty to leave that like that. Great, I'm happy with that. So I remember I just added an argument to this new function here. So the first argument was input, second one is inhabits, and what does it inhabit? So we're going to write here what it inhabits. So it should be, one of these should have a very long, I thought I put that, I didn't grab, there was something here that had a nice default that I liked. I didn't grab it in time, so we're going to undo all this coding. We're going to grab this, Control C, I'm going to redo the coding, wish I could code that fast, and now we can, oops, I was going to put in the variable called inhabits, so we're going to say let inhabits equal this, right? And I need to define world ID. So that will add an import to the top. Thanks, Ceylon. And that should all compile. So the server has been running a while. It's better to restart the server at this point. If you were watching from the start, you would have seen what happens to the client if you try and join a server that's been running a long time. And the reason why is because the server doesn't yet transmit to the client that it should jump forward to a certain tick. Among other problems. And I mean, it's okay to have problems. Like, this stuff's really complicated. I need to solve problems one at a time. You'll be surprised to find out it didn't compile first time. Because, you know, I'm just so perfect. GD Star World link, I'm not, I'm just joking. At line 80. So this used to be a comma in the old code, but it needs to be a curly bracket now. Wrong kind of curly bracket, the kind that's actually a semicolon. Okay. Okay, so now there's other problems. what I like about Rust is it tells you all the problems right away, and then there's no more problems after that. So Star World Link, apart from all your logical flaws about writing the wrong code and your game being not cool, Star World Link yet 79. I should have read what the error was. Okay. So this inhabits type, I mustn't have exposed it out of action. So here we have the enumerator that is public. If I go to actions, here I get the module for player input, but I don't expose it publicly. This way I can deliberately list the things I want to expose. Here is a list of things I want to expose. I'm not going to add that inhabits to the list. Now that I've added it to the list and I go over here, C-Line will detect that I can import that, and it will make it red to say you can now import it, so we'll do so. And if I look at the top here, what it's just done is it's added these words like inhabits to this, the end of this. For me, it's also added things like server here and all the other things that I've done that define on. It might be a bit messy, but it was a lot easier. I can always sort these by name later or something, or make them tidy. There's lots of boxes in front of my chat window. Hope you guys aren't oh, still no questions. That's okay. Feel free to ask me questions. I will answer them. Okay, there's a server running. So with the server running, remember what we're trying to look for here is that the client should be able to push buttons, and we should do them in the print output. I don't know if it's going to work first time, that particular functionality, we'll see. Here was the compile. Okay, so fix 64 hasn't been defined. That's just another matter of importing something. I'm using fixed width font floats. I'm not using the standard compiler floats. I'm using a library that basically puts those in ints and does the maths a different way. It's me being paranoid about lockstep and making sure that everyone agrees on exactly what things are. Hopefully it doesn't bite me. Like, there's a whole tirade on floats and predictability across multiple computers. I'm just sidestepping the problem by using fixed width ones, but it might not have been a problem. This might not actually solve it. I might miss something else. There's a whole bunch of detail. It's interesting that that's not exposed. So let's go to where it's defined. So we jump to the symbol. I can't grab this window. This is very annoying. It's gone off the top. My old standby of Alt Space M is not working. If we get rid of it with Shift Tab or Control F4, we'll close this. No. Okay, and if we run it again, where's the window go? Okay, so restarting it has fixed the problem, but it's left the terminal. It's left the yeah. That's right. Weird Constructor has pointed out that he also uses integers for his maths. So he's basically doing fixed point but by hand. Whereas I'm doing fixed point and I'm doing it using a really nice library for Rust. Let me just go to the definition. It's this library called fixed, which is, not a very hard name to remember. So you'd think I would have remembered it for Rust. And it has all these definitions. So you basically choose that you want a variable that has a 48-bit field for integers and a 16-bit field for fractions, and so that's a 64-bit number, right? And it will take care of all the other stuff for you, and you can any variable that's got less bits than one of these will just cast automatically. In any other case, you have to cast it manually, and then the maths between the different fractions will also cast and overflow, and all that other stuff's taken care of for you. So it just seems like so much less of a headache than trying to do it by hand. And probably actually more performant to do it this way than to do it by hand. So you should consider using fixed. Weird Constructor. Thanks for the comment though. Okay. And so I've also got this fixed portion 16, which is a value between -1.0 and 1.0, and I've split it into 65,056 possible values. So I'm using, there's 2 bits for the integer field, and there's 14 bits for the fraction, and this is what I'm using for the joystick inputs that are used from the player. Now we'll see if it works later on. I mean, I'm already using these fractions a little bit, but I haven't used them much for maths, so we'll have to see if they actually work in the end. It should be fun. Oh, in terms of the physics, what I might do is every frame round things to the nearest number and then let them go back to being float for the maths and then round them again. Apparently that works as well. But it sounds like there could be edge conditions there. There's detail. Yes, don't get overwhelmed by how much stuff there is to do. Now, problem is that fix64 was not defined in the other functions, so it wasn't pulled in from lockstep. So for some reason, CLion cannot detect that this is inside lockstep, so I have to do this myself. I just had to put it in this list of things that are being imported here. So we'll add it there. And that should fix the compile issue. I restarted the server. So, remember how we killed server? I think we killed server. It seems to be still sticking around. So it's going to run Process Explorer. I'm going to do this one on the other screen in case there's something running I don't want to show you because, you know, secrets. I don't think I have any secrets, but anyway. Process Explorer is like Task Manager, but awesome. There's a lot of executables here. I'm looking for server. No, SG server, which is the name of my process. Yeah, and it's still running inside of a console. I'll kill that, and hopefully nothing bad happens. And now if we run this again, yeah, it can open this port now. Okay, so Godot, which I opened earlier for that demonstration I did, is holding the DLL and it's not allowing it to be relinked. So we'll quit Godot. We're not saving anything. Something I did that was worth saving. And now that that's done, we can run the game again. So that big blob of text you saw is like a huge linker warning. I've seen it so many times now I know exactly what's wrong. Suffice to say, I can't recompile the DLL while the game is running. And at some point I might change that. So what I notice is that there's no output. There's no output on the screen that says it was trying to make an input. In fact, there should be there should actually be a warning that it tried to capture an action that didn't exist because I haven't defined what the buttons are yet. Wonder if we'll see that in here. So some problems to do with scripts, the spaceships, getting the scenes, opening walls. I don't see any problems with actions though. Yeah. So I'm not sure why we're not seeing the actions flow across to the server. What can I think of that could cause that? It's really odd. Okay. Let's just investigate the code. If we can't do that, I'll start adding more debugging to try and figure this out. Okay, so if we don't have an instruction queue, there we are. There's our problem straight away. So the reason why it's not working is because for every other world, we create a ship link. And the ship link, as part of its setup, is it creates this instruction queue. I think it does it here in process, and it will basically immediately try and set up all these events and instructions. Where do I do it? Build module. So it checks if it's and if it's not, it calls this function called setup events. And setup events will actually go and create these queues and define how big they are. Now, I mentioned before there's a special kind of world which is the one that doesn't define the ship, but it defines where the ship is. And that world does not have an entity like this ship link. That world is controlled by Starworld Link, really. And so nobody's actually going ahead and creating these queues for that world. So the other place where it's checking if the thing is some or none, it's always going to be none. It's never going to be able to find somewhere to send the instruction. So I need to add this list of instructions here. And if I look here, it's putting it in self. So we might do the same thing here. And it needs a copy of sector to do it. So let's jump back across to the Starworld link. We're going to, so the problem is that this instructions opt that I created up here, remember this code I created earlier, we need to actually create this list in the first place. I could put it in ready, but what happens if we end up with a frame where it's not set up? Some sort of reinitialization code happens because we lose our connection and reconnect. This node might still exist the whole time. I'm not sure how that would work. So the most resilient thing to do is to put it in the frame maintenance code, the recreations instruction buffer. Let's just leave it exactly where it is. So the way to do that would be to add an or else instruction. So we need to add something to do to the option here. Now, I'm just going to quickly find the documentation for Rust. I'm going to look up the documentation for I'm going to load the local documentation because it's faster. Do I do that? Do I even bother? Because I am not bothering. Here we go. Hold on. So I'm just typing rust up docs in another prompt. So if you type rust up docs like this, and you've got Rust installed, you don't mistype it like that. If you type it like this, then you're going to load, it's going to bring up a browser window on your computer that actually copies it from your own PC. So it finds the relevant default version of Rust installed and brings up all the documentation on Rust. Now, not only is it fast, but it works on a plane. So it's one of those things that's nice to know that actually exists. And so this gets installed for you when you install Rust. So you've got the whole API docs here, and you can directly search for it by typing into this box. So we're going to have a look at option. And option is basically, rather than having null pointers, we always have options. So an option defines, and I'm just going to make this black because white is so uncool. No, it burns my eyes, we want and then, no, or else. I just want to check that it does what I think it does. So or else takes a function and returns an option. And the other option is to use unwrap or, we'll just use or else because then we're allowed to still return a none. Pardon me. Oh. Does or else take anything? I think the function is an fn once, so my function doesn't take any arguments here. So taking no arguments, we're going to try and create an instructions list. So let's get started doing that. So here's some curly braces. We're making a closure function inside of or else. Now it's currently complaining because you don't return an option. So if I said none here, that will now compile. So what we're going to do inside of this is we're going to create the instructions queue in the first place. But I want access to the world, because if we don't have the instruction list but we do have the world, that's the time that I want to strike. So I'm going to move this or else inside of the and then that's above us. So and then gets the instructions, but it's possible when we get the instructions that we won't have any because it hasn't been initialized. So in that case we want the or else. Yeah, are you with me? I hope so. If not, just follow along for the ride and it'll make some sense later perhaps. So we got a sector, we get the space world. If we get the space world, we try and get the instructions list using and then. If we don't have it, we just going to return none, right? It's just too bad. Once we got the space world called world, we're going to try and get the instructions. It's possible that we won't find any because they're not initialized. In that case, we're going to call this or else branch. And I kind of want to pre-cache this. I might want to cache it, but I might not bother. if I wanted to cache it, I could make this new instructions list a member inside this node. Let's not bother doing that. We're just going to look it up every frame. It won't really be a big deal. I'm losing my train of thought here. Okay, so I already copied to clipboard how one makes the instruction lists. It's like this. So I want that code there. So we're going to make a new instructions queue. We're going to return that. So let instructions equal a new arc array, and then we tell the world to set up the instructions as being the array. This events and instruction stuff, not important right now. Don't need that. And then we want to return the new instructions that we've just created. We could have got them from the world again, but this seems kind of redundant. So we definitely got some instructions, so we return a sum. We return the instructions there. And that's us. So now we have instructions. I should be able to rerun the game, and that should work now. Okay, wait, first time again. I feel like Batman from the Lego movie. First time! If you've missed that, he fires like 1,000 batarangs before he like finally hits the button. It's very funny. I'm sure it was just as funny when I told you that now. Not found in this scope. Okay, so this ship world has a different name from the world here. No, it's not named C. Instructions is here. What is the problem with instructions here? We expect to get a reference to it, not the arc itself. Because the problem is that this get instructions returns a pointer to an arc. How does that work? I don't want to return a pointer to an arc. So get instructions returns a pointer to an arc. Yeah. How would we dereference a pointer? We'd have to do a map inside, or I think we just go .deref as deref. Cannot borrow, so world is immutable. We can't set up instructions because world is immutable. So this is back. We have to change from a get world to a get mute world because we might have to set up the instructions. If we might have to set up the instructions, then yep, so that fixes that problem. Great. Okay. Hopefully that means it will now compile. Except I put a space in here. There is a method with a similar name. I think I didn't call it get mute world. I think I called it get world mute. You know, how could I forget that? How are we going for time? Wow. So we should have time to get somewhere. Some instructions. Expected a reference but found an arc. Consider borrowing here. So I thought this as deref would take care of this problem. I don't want as deref. I just want deref. Is there a deref option? Okay, so so this other function has a pointer to an arc, which means that we either need to return a pointer to an arc, which is kind of impossible, or we need the other thing to always return a pointer. I could map it, but I'm just trying to find a nicer way of doing this. As deref. Yeah, so rather than deref, let's try map. So we're going to map it, use star or coerce or starting to think I've made my life too complicated. So rather than using or else, I might just drop back to being a lot more simple about this. Let's be more simple. So what we're dealing with is an instruction list. So get instructions returns a world instruction queue. So this is the thing we want to have a copy of. And it points to the, it only needs to be initialized one time. Oh, and it needs to be set to none down here. This stuff's exhausting. Let me just open the window. 1 second. This will bring in some fresh inspiration from the outside world in the form of not such a hot room. Okay. Instructions opt. So I'm going to move this or else out of here because this is not working. We've got a problem where there's two different types of things going on. We're not even going to use any of that. I'll just put that there for a second just for my own reference. So let instructions deep in thought over here, trying to figure out how to solve a pretty simple problem. So I want to let an instruction queue. So this is the way I usually do this kind of stuff. So we want to let instructions. This is no longer going to be an option. We're either going to find that we have one or we don't. If we don't have one, we're going to return. So is let some instructions equal self.instructions. Okay, so this inner branch, this first branch is called if we've already got the instructions loaded. Second branch, we need to actually create this mapping. We have to actually find the world, create this queue we're going to fill, and put it in self.instructions. Right? I'm sure you're not with me. That's okay. Ask the sector for the world, and then try and get the instructions. Okay? Great. And then, I really still want to use or else. Must resist urge to use or else. If instructions opt is equals you know, I just think I figured out how to solve this problem. I figured out what I need to type in this place here to make it work. I probably just need to type cloned, right? That'll probably fix the problem. And once again, I restart the server rather than trying to build the game. There's still a deref in there I hadn't seen. Apparently. It's like it's looking at old code. So I've got a reference to an arc, and if I just clone the arc, I'll get back, which is what I need to do anyway. I'll get back a fresh non-reference value, and then the types will match. And now I just need to remove the member that I just added. Keep restarting the server rather than running the game. I probably should have moved my target again. Same problem as last time where I was already running the game or something. Yeah, the game is still running somewhere, and then that's holding the DLL. This one's still got something open. What else I got? This one's still got something open. Wow, I've got a lot of failed games sitting around. I'm telling you guys, if you want to do some difficult compiling, difficult programming that you barely understand, you're going to be spending a lot of time fixing compile issues and annoying bugs. It's just the unfortunate nature of programming. So if you want to watch someone doing unfortunate programming that's really cool, I'm sorry, it's going to be full of bugs at the moment. As we go on, it's going to get more interesting. We'll get into all sorts of other things. So it's now caught up with the server. Oh, and have you noticed how much output there is here? I was just watching the server one scroll. So those people who don't know what's going on yet, we're watching exactly what we want to see. Every single tick, that's 60 times a second. The client, although the server's still running it at only 20. So we're actually updating on the client 3 times faster than we're updating on the server. So I probably need to change that at some point. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of unknowns in my head. I want nice, quick, and snappy action, but I'm not sure how to separate between the worlds are probably going to run at different speeds. So the factories run at 20 hertz, that's times a second, frames a second, and the movement of the ships at 60, which will then make it feel like, I want it to feel like an action RPG, but in space. You know, I want to name some games like the old Diablo series, for instance. Anyway, so what we're seeing here is those actions that I typed out to the this is a success. That button mask, I want you to, me holding that still for a while caused the client to drop out. It's interesting how we're not seeing it typing out that debug messages anymore. The server's still going really fast, but the client is no longer dumping that on the screen. So I'm going to quit the client. I guess that is action press button just returns false for every button that's not defined. If we're going to do what I want to do, I need to go through and make sure that every one of these actions, these buttons that are in the player inputs list that I showed you earlier, left, right, up, down, back, special 1, special 2, trigger 1, trigger 2, cycle left, cycle right. I haven't defined what those are yet. So I need to spin up Godot, and I need to tell it all the different buttons that I want in my game. So let's just go through and do that. And then I'll be able to find them. So this is, don't get too hung up on the scenery if you just joined us. It's trees and stuff. It's just for loading. Project settings. Okay. Input map. This defines which buttons do what. What's cool is that later on we can use like standard functionality to map these. So there's something called UI accept, and it can be any of these buttons here. UI select, UI cancel, focus next, focus previous, UI left, UI right, so on and so on, right? So we want to match these ones here. So let me just put this on the right hand side. And unfortunately I maximized it to the bottom. Probably should get some sort of, there's a whole bunch of little things I could do to make my quality of life better as a streamer, but because I'm not that, like, I haven't put the effort in and that serious about it yet, haven't done them. So one thing would be some sort of tiling window manager that understands I want to keep the bottom empty so that I don't put things behind the camera view you can see. Okay. Project settings. You've got an input map. So every one of these inputs you can see on the right here, button left, button right, button up, button down, button back, button special, I want to put in the input map. Going through my head is a thought that maybe this data is also in the project file. Let's have a look at the project file real quick and see if we can find it. No, I don't want to update Notepad++. File, open. Yeah, I don't mind starting in this folder. Whoops. I hate when I click and drag like one folder into the wrong place. There's a project file in this game folder, which is the Godot root. I can't remember what it's called. It's not that hard to remember. And here is the input. So for each one of these inputs, got the name of the input, dead zone, events. Interesting. I don't know what events means. Okay, so that's like a very long way of saying what buttons are bound, I guess. So zoom in and zoom out have multiple events. Interesting. Okay, let's do it using the UI. So action, we're going to add an action called button left. We don't have button left yet. Enter add. Good, okay, let's go. So in case you missed this, I'm just typing in all the ones that are on the right hand side there, like it's half selected. Okay, so that's a lot of different buttons. Let's quickly read these to make sure they seem sensible. Okay, so let's go through and add. I'm going to have problems because I want to use the cursor keys or WSAD. See, I'm already using ship control, ship forward, ship back, ship turn left, ship turn right, strafe left, strafe right. And down the track, I might actually want to have different keybinds for different vehicles, essentially, which is kind of where I was coming from here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of these ones which say left, right, up, down. I'm going to use the ship ones for these for now. So we'll just rubbish these. And then I'm going to go across to this side. I'm going to put the ship ones in that I already had defined. So so this is called ship what do I call it? Ship turn left. This one's called ship turn right. Wonder if this remembers my previous commands. Yes, it does. Okay, so because this remembers my previous command, I can take advantage of something I did the other day, which was I took all the different commands that I wanted to output, being a list like this, and I put them into Python, and I did all the formatting there. So we're going to do that real quickly a second time, and this time we're going to use reload the new names. So here's a list I was starting to create in there. So I was particularly interested in these ones on the left hand side, these ones. So let me just paste them down here like this. And so I want to call these a different name now. So button ship turn left, ship turn right, ship, what do I call this? Forward. I mean, you know, strictly speaking, that's thrust. Ship, backward, back. And then we've got strafe as well. So strafe left, strafe right. So one thing I've found quite useful is to use Python as a very quick way of changing a list into something you can kind of determine programmatically from the original list. So in this case, I want to turn a number of constants into strings that match. Now, I could probably spend some time and effort and learn how to make macros in Rust, but to limit the amount of stuff I'm worried about, I'm minimizing that. So anyway, we're going to make a multi-line string contains that text, and we're going to use something called split, which turns into a list. It puts the list into a variable. Variable is called underscore. It's like a magic variable for whatever you don't bother to put into variable in Python. Okay, so we're going to make L for list equal underscore, and then that kind of saves it. Okay, and then there's also a variable called out2, which is as shown there, that I could also use, but this other way works also outside of IPython. Oh great. This is the line of code that's going to do that. So for every single one of the things that I've just typed in, it's taken it and it's put it next to the same thing in lowercase in a string, and then I can just paste that in here. Paste. And as pointed out by the white font, some of the masks are missing up here. So let's just quickly go through and fix these masks. It's going to left, it's going to turn right, it's going to strafe left and right, but I'm not going to bother with those. It's going to go up, it's going to go back. Now, as we look at this list, you'll start to notice that we're running out of spaces. There's currently 12 different values here. Oh, we're dealing with a 32-bit value, so we're not even halfway there yet. So we want 2 more. I was worried about running out of space in my mask, but I've still got plenty of bits left. So here we've got 1, 2, 4, 8. So now we're going to start with one with the next nibble, as it's called. This thing is so awesome that half a byte is a nibble. And we've got 1 and 2. And it's a nibble with a Y, N-Y-B-B-L-E. So cool. Anyway, I mean, like, what's half a byte? A nibble. I can never be like, yes, what's the joke? I might just keep these consistent in the same order. Not that it actually matters, it has no reason why it matters, but just making so the masks and the stuff at the below. And why we're separating the ships into 2 sections, well, it's for legacy reasons. It's just because I can't be bothered remapping all the moving all those numbers around. It would probably be absolutely trivial to fix their numbering, but I don't want to talk about it too long because then I'll just lose the time benefit of not doing it. Yay. So, all the inputs are now mapped. But I haven't assigned any buttons to most of them. Haven't got back, special 1, special 2, trigger 1, trigger 2, cycle left, cycle right. I have no idea what those buttons are going to do yet, so I don't really care if it's not possible to push them. See, by not having any buttons assigned here, I can't possibly push them right now. But I can push them later when I bind those, so I'm going to ignore that problem. Save and close, because I imagine I just saved the project. Let's review our changes so far. Commit. So there are these files here, these import files. I think I accidentally put some extra files that I don't want. We've got the Godot project file, so it's created all these empty buttons that are not being used. And then we've got the Star World link, which contains what does it contain again? Yes, so because it's out of context, we want to figure this out. This is the new code that grabs the inputs and puts it in the world that we were just talking about earlier. And that's most of our work's been in this file. We've got this helper mod. We fixed a compilation issue here. We've got actions. We added some, exposed some more things to core. And in player input, we've added the ability to have XOR, which is useful for that detection of differences, and we've changed these bindings. So these are things we've fixed since the stream started. There's also another commit that I did earlier off stream. I fixed this was our work from the previous stream that I recorded, and this one here I just went through and fixed the compilation issues in actions and so on. I'm not going to go too much into detail of what I did, but I just went through and made it work, compile. But not doing anything useful yet. We're doing the useful stuff now. Okay, that's great. So we don't need Python for now. Let's run the game again. I want you to see that dump. We should see the Okay, so my defaults for what is being initialized really don't matter that much now, but they are referencing values that. I'm just going to remove the button states here. Set this to button 0. Button mask 0. And button change is also button mask 0. 0. It was referencing names we just removed, which is why I didn't compile. Just waiting for the game to compile. Here's the game launching. Okay, so I want you to focus. There's a in the apply, we're looking at this button mask here, button mask 0. I'm going to push the cursor keys, and we should be seeing that button mask changing, but I'm not seeing any changes to the button mask. and I look at the screen. So the code that is reading those actions is not actually noticing the buttons being pressed. I'm pushing these other buttons here. So you notice the camera is actually bound to the movement commands. Later on, you probably won't be able to move the camera manually. You probably it's just going to track the player. But because I've added the movement commands before, you could actually move the character. You know, it made sense to move the camera first. Later on, there'll be some tool you can use that puts you in a map view, and then you can move the camera with the cursor keys. So I'm just wondering, why is that mask not changing? Because I'm not sure if I need to have this code spamming right now. I can't think of a reason why I still want this. So I'm just going to close those because I find scrolling text really distracting. Okay, so let's have a look, just quickly read through this code and see if I can figure out why the part of the code that's reading the inputs is not actually setting them into this data structure. Here we have collect input. And in here we have button state uses current mask, which it gets from build button mask. And here we start with buttons being 0, and then we OR in a series of masks that we get from key binding string. Right? And to OR in the masks, we return ourselves ORed with the right hand side. So I don't see a problem with any of those pieces of logic. Most likely reason is because this is input pressed. Is not returning true for the inputs in the way that I expect it to. And the most obvious reason I can think of is because I keep putting these prefixes here saying button, and those prefixes are not in Godot. So that'll be our bug. When I say button shift turn left, button shift turn right, it doesn't match anything that's in Godot. I need to just say shift turn left, shift turn right. I'll leave those in. I think I typed those in. But these ones here that I was actually testing with, yeah, they weren't called originally button underscore blah blah. Okay, so with that fixed, I'll now start the server again, start the game again, do that test another time. Okay, so I can see some numbers changing, but I can't really get a fix on it. Let's try it on this console. It's going very, very, very fast, so it's hard to see what's going on. So I can see here. See, this is a 1. There's a 2 when I'm going this way. 1, 2. I hope you can see that on stream. Going up is a 4, 8. Now I'll push 2 at once. You get 6, 5, 10. Now on the other side we've got the server. So here's a server's text. Now it would be extremely weird if the server did not match the client, because I'm very confident in the network code matching these two. But we should be able to see the same thing here. I can't even see it in this output, it's just too fast. Wow. This is hard to see. Oh, it's still moving. Set player input, player input, player ID. There's the button mask there. Can you see it? Button mask 6. So the server is seeing the same thing. And this would be really surprising if it wasn't working, because I'm using the way I'm using SUDI and so on. So this camera, the keys are stuck because I clicked off. We're going to go through the skybox in a second. Embarrassing, but it's not that big a deal, really. Okay, stay on task. So now the server knows we want to move something, and we're also moving the camera. So there's a whole lot of things I need to do at the same time. Okay, so to rattle those off, I need to move something. We could just start by moving a ship. Let's just start by hard coding it that it always moves one of the ships. That would be really cool to see, actually. So I need to move a ship. Need to stop moving the camera. Moving the camera is a nuisance now. Actually, I probably want to rebind the camera. So if we go back to Godot, So here we are in Godot, and we look at the I'm going to just quickly look at the camera logic. So my camera, that's the actual camera. So here's the camera at the top here, and it's parented on this node called look at. So if I move the look at node, the camera moves, and I've set the two of them up so that whatever I want to look at, it'll be the right distance from the camera in this relationship. And there's also some logic that will basically change the zoom and the distance between these two when I push the zoom in and out buttons. So that's the way I've set my camera up. So if we look inside the script for the look at function, you'll see here that when I push these buttons, camera right, camera left, camera down, camera up, it moves the camera around. So I need to, I've already got, it's good to see that these bindings are different, have a different name, but I've assigned them to the same key. So if I go into my project settings and I go into my input map and I go and find these buttons, here they are, camera left, camera right, camera up, camera down. They're currently, WASD. So, which is like a pattern of 4 keys on the keyboard. So I'm going to move them to JKLI. So left is going to be J. Whoops, J. I have to push OK. Right is going to be this. Up is going to be this one. And down is going to be this one. So those are a pattern of 4 keys on the other side of the keyboard to move the camera. So if I rerun the game now, pushing the other keys should do nothing. Sorry, it should just tell the server we want to move, but it shouldn't actually move the camera. Save and close. So I had to quit Godot between these steps because otherwise I can't recompile my game DLL, and I'd be surprised if I could leave the game DLL alone. So that's hooning off. Here I am moving the camera. Here I am not moving the camera. See, these are pushing the original keys. But even when I push the original keys, I can still see this button mask. Whoops, sorry. It won't work if I'm not clicked into my client. I can still see the button mask is changing. So as it's not moving the camera, see how the player's not moving? So here I am moving the player around with those other keys. So I've got everything I want. So the next step is going to be that when I push the keys, I want this big ship to turn around. That will be cool to see. Let's quit out of this. And it won't just turn around on one of the clients, it'll turn around on both clients if they're both watching at the same time. However, if they join the server at different times, they won't agree on where the ship is, because I haven't got it. The server doesn't transmit that at the start yet. Great. Okay. No pressure, Tom. Okay. Actions, player input. Apply. So here is where we're writing that debug message I was showing you earlier. So we know the data is arriving at both the server and the client. I'm going to comment that out because it's like super spammy. Okay. We're going to be inside of a physics object. I'm going to do the barest possible I can do to make this just work. Okay. Okay. So we want to calculate a movement vector as designed by the player, or maybe we're going to rotate this thing directly. Yeah, let's do the. So first thing we want to know is which button is the person pushing. So to write that out, we just need to use self. So if self.button mask, it might be nice to write a define that's going to make this a little bit easier to manage. So I might put that inside player input. So player inputs impl is down here, here. So pub fun, it's fun, yeah. Joke. Push. You pass in a button mask. And if that button is pushed, we're going to return true. And it's going to be true if button and button, we need self as well. It's going to be true. Do we pass it by reference? Might as well. If button mask self dot pressed button date, I called it, equals button. So if all the buttons you specify here, so you can specify multiple buttons if you want to create a chord or a combo. If all those buttons are pressed, and maybe some other ones are pressed too, but if at least those buttons are pressed, we're going to return true. Otherwise, we're going to return false. That's what that logic will do. And so in apply, I'm going to put an if statement. So if self.input.pushed, that's always called pressed everywhere else I've seen, so I'm going to call it pressed. So it's just changed it down here too, because I used the rename feature. Wonder if I should get like some sort of endorsement or sponsorship from C-Line. Anyway, whatever. If that is pressed, it's a good tool. Mostly because it just saves that little bit of time here and there, but also because it just seems to work really well. And I also like their other products. Stop now while you're ahead, Tom. Okay. Actions. In fact, the masks I'm looking for are in the same file. At some point I need to break these into multiple files. This is getting a little bit ridiculous. So I'm most interested in these turn left, turn right, forward, back. I also want the strafe keys. I'm just going to copy this whole lot. I'm going to put it down here like this. I'm going to just go back and forward. There's probably a faster, I don't have to do this. I could split the window or something similar. So if left is pressed, do lefty things, right? If right is pressed, we're going to do right type stuff. If forward is pressed, if back is pressed, so that's those ones. If strafe left is pressed, and finally this one, if strafe right is pressed. It's nice to have an editor with clipboard history. It just saves so much energy. So in this editor, it's Control-Shift-V to do that. So I'm going to put these ones. So these top ones are going to actually move the ship, or at least apply a lateral force to the ship. The bottom two are going to. Sorry, I've arranged these incorrectly. The top two will rotate the ship, and the bottom four are going to apply the lateral force. So forward, back, left, and right, like strafing, it's going to apply lateral forces to move the ship around. The top two are turning. And when I push the button, I expect to see a latency between when I push the button and when it actually does it, because at the moment we're in lockstep and we're not doing any prediction. Which is sufficiently good for what I'm trying to get doing right now, because I'm trying to minimize how many things I'm doing, and I don't want to add prediction until I know what I want to do exactly. But prediction should be quite easy under this model as well. Prediction is when you guess what's going to happen next based on inputs. But the server isn't, yet there yet, as far as you know. To me, it's a difference between Quake and Quake World, but that's just, when I was playing multiplayer games. Turn left, turn right. Okay, so we're working with specs, and in specs we have something called a world. That's exactly the world we've got passed in here. Now, inside of specs we have multiple components. So if we ever look down here in server, that's where my specs components are. No, sorry, I've missed it. I wasn't thinking server, I was thinking simulation. So in here in server simulation, I think I put in ships. No. Okay. I'm going to do a search for this. It's called ship. It's probably called Spaceship. Okay, this isn't what I was thinking of. That's what I was thinking of. So it's in a file called Spaceship. I click on this, it'll tell me where it is. Oh, it's in the top level. Okay, so obviously I was expecting to create a whole module around this, but I ended up doing nothing else yet. So this is a structure. This is the first time I think I've shown a specs component here on stream. So this is a structure, and it derives some useful stuff. And then I implement something called component for Spaceship, and I define how one would store a spaceship if it was a component inside of specs. So in this case, I define it as a vector. So I create a vector that has a space for every single entity in the world. And if the world just so happens to have a spaceship, for that entity number, there's a space already in the vector for it. So if you know the entity, which is basically just a number, if you know the entity number, you know the index into this vector, bam, you're there. But if you've got lots of entities which aren't actually spaceships, it's going to waste space. So some of my entities are players and some of them are spaceships, but the amount of space it's going to waste is very, very small, so it's better to just have a fixed array like this. If I wanted a different rule, there are alternate data structures. So vex storage is one, but there's also hash map storage and so on. If you have a look at specs, it'll make sense. I wonder if I should... I might just do that. Hold on. Just rattling through my bag to use a medical aid for my unbreathingness. So the spaceship component, that's the thing we move around, but it's not the physics thing. That's the ship. Do we move the physics thing? I don't think we're going to do that. What is the physics thing? I can't even remember how I did that now. It's been too long. I forget stuff pretty fast. And that will be inside of the shipwell class. Where did I put this? I think I put it in worlds. And I called it Space, the final frontier. These are the voyages of the USS Enterprise. Okay. World wrapper, build. I'm sorry. You have to go somewhere else for those episodes. Build, update, post tick, make a space, add a spaceship. So this is how we're currently making a spaceship. So we create the spaceship in a certain location. That's where it is. And then we create a physics body builder, which creates a physics body and it gives it a certain location. This is creating a linear force. This is where how much is moving, and that term there is why the ships are drifting. Now, if you've watched before, I removed it in the past, but I reverted those changes when I reverted the network code. So we're going to put that back in. So now the ships will no longer drift apart when the game starts. That was just a piece of testing code anyway. Now, what I can't remember off the top of my head was in my synchronization code. Did I copy the values of the location from the spaceship and place them into the physics body every frame? I don't remember. I've got something here called space state. And space state base takes care of what we do for the updates. It's updating my own head about what's going on. So in run now, we're actually updating everything. First we create all the physics bodies. That creates all the physics bodies. This is these functions and classes are coming from a library up here that handles, it's called specs physics, and it handles a synchronization between physics and the real world. I wonder if Ardawan, are you listening, Ardawan? Because if you're not, this is the stuff that he was specifically asking about this. I wonder if he's online or if he's missing out. He's missing out. Well, I have to make sure that he watches it on YouTube. So where are we now? We're about 2 hours in. Oh well. I have to make sure to tell him, because he's really curious about how physics is working. Yeah, he's missing out. That's just what happens. You got to hang out in the Discord to find out when I'm talking. Hey, yeah, Discord server. You guys should hit me up. This is Recall Singularity. If you Google it, you'll find all the things. I probably even mentioned it on the Twitch stream underneath at the bottom there. Making a factory game in space. So to all 13 of you who are currently working writing, I'm just going to quickly put in my Twitter channel profile link. Here it is. And I'm going to tell you that you guys should really be coming and hanging out in our Godot. In our Discord. Interested in Godot Rust development? You can talk about it in there. If you're not, edit invite link, expire. Never. You can always come and join me. Generate a new link, and you can talk about a variety of things. Use the copy button. I'm going to place it in the chat. You're so invited. Bring your friends. Talk about game development. Talk about your favorite game. Whatever. Just be kind. It's all cool. We're friends here. There's actually quite a few people making Godot and Rust games now, and a few space ones too. So please do hop on by and chat with us. And if you want to join the stream again, I'll be mentioning it there. And if you've missed some of it, I'll be putting it on YouTube later, and you'll be able to watch the rest that you missed. I hope it's recording. It's a recording on Twitch anyway. The other side is now finished. Congratulations. So there's someone in there called Arda1 who's wondering how I was doing the physics. I'm really just getting started. We're about to move the ships, which is the first bit of really using the physics. Until now, that's been drifting. So it was about the synchronization. So we're going to call prepare physics. Here we add thrusts that we wish to add. That sounds suspiciously useful. Here we add thrusts that we wish to add. Okay. And over here, we've got inputs. Yay, Adwani is on the stream. Don't worry, Adwani, I will. However, the part that you care about is the part we're at to now. So we've got on the server, we've got all the inputs from the user. And over here, we've got the physics updates going on, which is quite basic so far. We've got a spaceship object. I've just realized that I need to figure out how to control the ship. So let's do that. And the way I want to do it is I want to create a new component which encodes the pilot's desire to move the ship, the controls that the pilot wants. So this is processing. I'm thinking about a ship is inhabited like by a player, but it could also be controlled by an AI of some kind, which we're going to worry about like a lot later on. And the AI has a whole bunch of data. And then that's going to create a demand for certain input controls to the ship. And then during the physics tick, we'll take the input controls and move the ship around. This way, we're kind of decoupling things a bit. They're not too tightly coupled, so the inputs don't understand the physics. They just know that they're trying to give those instructions to the ship. We might scale those inputs as well. Okay. So down here, we have a spaceship module. And it has a structure called spaceship, and it has a component, and we're going to end an implementation for that. And this last part here, this is for my way of serializing it so that it gets sent into Godot. I've created my own thing called a game map, which is like a hash map, and then later on I've created my own mapping. It's got like its own variant type structure. It's very much a custom thing to meet the needs of decoupling my simulation code from my Godot code and putting the types through into variants the way I want. It's, yeah, technical. Suffice to say, this is for debugging and or UI logic, that part there. So I'm going to add something new to the spaceship, which is going to be for the input. So let's just make it in a submodule. So use usually something that inhabits a spaceship you'd call an actor or something similar. So let's just call it an actor input or something similar. So we'll call it mod actor input, right? And it's going to encode what the player or the AI that's controlling the ship wants to do with the ship. I wonder if I can just, oh, look at that. I can create a new module file. Add. And it's created a folder called spaceship and put an actor input file in it. That's really handy. It's the first time I've done that. I normally add the file first and then put the mod in second, so I never realized you could do that. I'm just going to copy, this is a copy of Spaceship. That's not what I actually want. I'm going to write something, but I just was trying to give myself a template for an empty component. So what I want to know is I want to know lateral x, and that's going to be proportional. Remember I mentioned the proportional float from earlier? Okay, it can't find proportional float. thought I just called it proportional. It'll be in this file called lockstep because that's where I put all my constants. Oh, fixed portion 16. Okay. So it's a 16-bit number that's actually pretending to be a float between -1 and +1. So we've got a lateral x and y. So the x is basically strafing, the y is thrusting forward and backward. We're going to want to do a rotation. So we're just going to put that also as a portional. So rotation, another portional. And I don't see any reason why I want to specify here that this is going to be like who created this. Do I? I'm not going to bother specifying that it was a player that wants to do those things. I'll assume that the system that populated this knew what it was doing. We're going to implement component, which is a specs concept for this. This is not spaceship. This is going to be, I don't want to use rename because if I use rename, things might go badly wrong. I might rename spaceship throughout my project. I don't want to rename it in this file. So what are we renaming it to? Input instructions. Oh, that's right, actor instruction. Actor input. Right. And I'll copy this manually down to there. Vex storage is something from specs. Did that work? Oh, I was trying to get the in algebra one. That's not the one we want. Okay. Awesome. So now we know what we want to do with our ship. Well, we've got a structure to contain the instruction to do it. So let's link that up. In player input, you turn left, you turn right, you turn forward, you turn back, strafe left, strafe right. We need to get a copy of the lateral input. I'm going to get the first ship we can find in specs, and we're going to control that. Later on, we'll actually use this inhabit command. There's this idea of you inhabiting a particular thing, and that inhabit's going to specify which ship you're controlling. So when you go to the console of a ship, you inhabit the console, and then you own the ship and you control it. For now, it's going to use the first ship. So we've got a world. The world has components, so I'm going to want certain things from it. I want certain system data. And so I need to think to myself, what system data do I want? Well, I want, so let's create this. So I want a list of the ships. I want a list of the actor inputs. Those are the only things I can think of that I might want at this point. So I want all the ships and actor inputs that are in this world equals this. Now we need to tell Godot, we need to tell specs what the types of these two things are. So when it comes to ships, I don't want to write those. I just want to read those. Okay, so we use read. In fact, we don't use read. We use read something called read storage. Right? No, read. And we're going to use spaceship. So now we've got and import that. So we're importing this component. So you could think of this as like a read-only list of all the spaceships. It's more complicated than that, but it's a close enough analogy. We also want, and I'm going to need to put brackets here because I'm actually defining the type of a tuple. We need to put here a write storage, and we want to be able to write to actor inputs. Cool. Now there's one more thing, which is when we created the spaceship in the first place, which is created in that ship world. I think it's somewhere in here. Where are we? Where did I manufacture my spaceship? I have actually forgotten where that happened. Space. So when I make another Star Trek code. Okay, here's where we make a spaceship. We want to also create an actor input. And we'll define it so that the actor input. That's another interesting thing. What happens to a ship when you are holding down the forward key and then you stop controlling it? We have to make sure that something sensible happens. It could be that in the case of systems like this, often what you do is you have multiple brains, and that you fall back to a default one. So we might put in here later on an enumerator that specifies, yeah, again, I'm going to figure this stuff out as we go, so I'm not too worried about it. This word default is going to use a default of fixed portion 16, which is most likely 0. 0 is exactly the default I want. So I don't even need to say new, I just need to say default here. And make sure I've imported that. Probably is imported. No, we'll see if that compiles later on. What have I missed? Oh yes, so typically in my code, as I've mentioned before, when I have a module, I create a module for the thing, and then further down I put a pub use like this, pub use actor input, and the structures in it, and that way I don't have to like have such a long use statement later on. And then this here is going to go red, and I can now import it. So the reason why I couldn't import it before is this here is not a public. Cool. So with that done, this spaceship has the instance of an actor input here. So now we're going to go back to the Star World link. No. Where is our player input? We're going to find the first actor input we can find. So this can now be imported. We can find the first actor input we can find. So this is the code that will do that. Create a tuple that contains a reference to it. We call a function called join, which uses a trait in specs. We don't want any one, we want the first one. We're going to that is going to be an option. So let first ship equal this. We want to if let some first equal that, like so. If there was a first ship, we want to get that out and call it first ship, so we'll return first in the if statement. If there was not a first ship, we're going to return an error from this action. That error is going to be in the action results. And let's have a look at all the different reasons why things don't work. No auth, not yours, tail blocking, player blocking, text locked, outside bounds, disconnected, module not found, entity missing. We'll just use the entity missing error for now. So if there's no ships that can possibly that are allowed to be controlled, we're going to control no ships. I had to put the word return here. Now, Rust has detected that this branch of the if statement cannot possibly, like, it exits. So it doesn't matter what the type of that is. So either we got a first, which is the instance, a reference to an actor input, or this doesn't matter. So now first ship isn't even an option, it's actually a pointer to an actor reference. So I could even put the type here and it would work. Right? But we don't just want a pointer to it, we want a writable pointer to it. So here I need to make this mutable, mute. And over here I need to say that this is mutable. Well, actually no, I don't think you have to say that's mutable. I think you say that this is a mutable reference, like that. However, I'm only putting this actor input here for your benefit so that you understand what the hell is going on. I'm going to leave that out again. We're using NPhysics 3D. Yes, we're currently using 3D physics. So, and I'm using specs physics to do the synchronization. In a second I'm going to jump back to the sync code. You'll get to read a whole bunch more of that. So hopefully that'll help enlighten you as to what the hell is going on. Adwani, to answer the question you asked. I'm not sure yet if I want 3D physics, but I like the idea of ships flying over each other, and I like the idea of coming in and then like coming down to land or flying into a docking port. And so those things sound like 3D physics. You probably could do them with collision masks or something clever like that, and that would probably be more performant. So I need to figure it out, because if I use 3D physics, there's a lot of 3D physics I'm going to want to turn off. And if you hit another ship, I don't want it to tip up and go over. I want it to like stay on the same plane, which is basically 2D physics. So again, I'm figuring this stuff out as I go, because this is a 2D. I'm rendering in 3D a 2D game. Okay. if you push the left button, then we want to specify first ship. So first we're going to reset. Maybe we'll go into the inputs, actor input, and we'll add a reset to this. Do I want to reset it? I could even have incremental inputs so you can kind of half control things. And there's all sorts of ways to approach this problem. But I'm going to reset it every frame for now so that you don't have one frame affecting the previous frame or the next frame. So I want to put something in here that's going to reset all the values. It needs to be public, so I can call it from the other one. Self. And it's going to go through each of these values and reset them back to 0. Or it's just going to use default for that. Let's reset. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to reset the input. Why is this unhappy? Okay, I need to mark this as being mutable so I can write to it. We need to reset the input first ship dot. Did I make all these public? Yes. Lateral X. No, it's not lateral X. I want to change. It's the turning one. Rotation. Might need to have y-axis for hovering. It doesn't matter. The hovering would be if you wanted to fly one spaceship inside another spaceship and you were doing collisions on the larger spaceship properly. But if you're happy for each spaceship to basically be infinitely tall in terms of physics, then 2D physics is enough. No matter how you render it, you can still leave it in the 2D world until the very moment you put it into Godot. That was kind of the insight of using 3D to render a 2D game. Just because the physics engine treats it as being at 0 doesn't mean that the models can't go up and down based on some other rules not determined by physics. However, my physics in Godot itself are probably 3D because they're all going to be for effects, just to like the particles and stuff. That'll be later on. So, you know, if you blow something up or shoot laser beams and stuff, that's going to be fully in Godot effects. Because there's no reason why that kind of effect has to be 100% the same between both two clients. Just needs to look good on each one of them and accurately, like, you know, show the explosion in the right sort of place-ish. So let's just put the inputs the actor inputs over here so you can see what I'm doing. Yes, it is confusing, and yeah, it makes sense in my own head. And it comes down to game design as well. Like, I have to make a choice based on game design, and there's some major choices in terms of how we're going to do the ships that I haven't decided yet. I haven't decided if I really want all the ships to be on the same level, or is it possible to fly up and down a bit. I like the idea that the game is simplified by being two-dimensional. But I also can imagine a very large ship would be annoying if you had to always fly around it rather than being able to just go over it. So it might be that large ships have to stay in the middle level. Like, you imagine there's 5 levels, and the very larger ships must stay in the middle. And there might be 1 story or 2 stories or 3 stories tall. And then medium ships can go up and down a bit, and then small ships can go down a lot. So a small ship can always go up and over and under anything. So that was kind of my idea of simple 2D. Or we go all the way to like what Homeworld has, where you can like basically go up and down a long way. That you don't usually worry about that. You usually play on one plane, and so you can surprise people. They don't expect you to come in. The AI never comes in vertically, which is deliberately there, so that it's fun to exploit that. So if you're pushing the turn left button, then we want to reduce the rotation. Left turns this way, and that's usually negative. Positive's usually turning that way. It's probably hard to explain on camera. Clockwise is usually positive. So left is going to be anti-clockwise. So the rotation is going to be as left as it can be. And then if you push right, the rotation is going to be as right as it can be. Right? So we're just encoding the inputs. This is very similar. So if you push forward, you want the lateral Y to be as high as it can be. Let's put this stuff underneath, because usually you do X first, then Y. If you're pushing back, you want it to go down. So let's just say that positive is forward and negative is backward. That sounds like it's a rational idea. Left, but then left is going to be negative and right is going to be positive. I hope I'm matching my coordinates go the other way. If I do that, then it's going to make my coordinates more confusing, because when I'm looking inside a spaceship, my tiles go positive, increase in value going from left to right, and they increase in value going from top to bottom. So I probably should match that. So left is reducing lateral X, right is increasing lateral X, forward is decreasing lateral Y, backward is increasing lateral Y, and that way those coordinates work the same, both inside and outside the ship. Okay. So when you provide this action, whenever you get an input, so later on the inputs are going to affect just one ship, but right now they always affect the first ship. Then what it does is it resets the inputs for that ship, and then it specifies into this input structure what the player wished the ship would do. And this could be an AI player later on. And it populates this data structure here called actor input. So the next step is to take actor input. So we could output on the screen what actor input is every frame if we wanted to, but let's not do that just yet. In spaceship space, this is where we manage the physics, and we do that by calling this thing called space state. Space state contains all the information I needed to do to manage a space world, and part of that are these data structures here. So the whole in physics and also the specs physics is templated on two concepts. One of them is, are you using floats or some other field? That's a real field, and a class that specifies the position of where your thing is in space. These two things, right? And so when I made a management class, I made it so it was also templated on the very same things. And then somewhere in here, or in the other file, I can't remember where I put this. Yes, here it is here. I made a choice as to what the two types were. So I chose F32 and pos. And pos is just a really simple wrapper on this thing called isometry 3, which is like a transform, basically. So we're using F32s for now. Down the track I might change to a fixed value, but I'll do it once I know, like I'll get it working with floats, and then I'll change and see what the performance cost is of using a fixed value. The advantage of a fixed value is it will give me physics that's definitely deterministic on all platforms. With floats I might have problems with rounding on some platforms, maybe, I don't know actually, it's unclear how much of a problem I'm going to have. I don't want that problem, maybe. It might turn out that I don't care, because actually the server will keep correcting any errors that happen. I don't need it to stay 100% in lockstep, I just need to stay mostly in step. How my synchronization works is yet to be determined in many ways. So I might be quite tolerant of the server and the client drifting out of sync, and then the server saying, oh, you're out of sync, let me fix that entity. Here's a new value for that. And if that's the case, I don't really care if they're in sync, and then I won't care if I'm using F32 or not. That's my thought on the matter for now. The advantage of that is that if you synchronize every possible little detail to the clients, right down to the individual asteroids, everything the server knows, you let people open up something, the map cheats. Whatever the client already knows can be revealed to the player. You can't expect that the client is going to keep that information hidden. So, for instance, if we add an ability where a ship can be cloaked, but we tell the client everything about that area of space, then the client's computer knows there's a cloaked ship there. It's just deciding every frame not to draw it on the screen. So if someone could write a cheat that would draw it on the screen, the player would get an unfair advantage. If the server doesn't ever tell the player there's a ship there until you literally crash into it, then that's actually better for security, right? And you might make some sort of trade-off where you decide that right before you crash a couple of frames you tell the client, so they have almost no warning, but at least then you don't have some sort of weird glitch. So, that's partially why I don't want to tell the client every possible thing about the world and operate in lockstep. Yeah. So where we were was finding the physics world, which we have. We've got these classes to synchronize the world. They come from specs physics. Synchronize the bodies in, that creates the physics bodies from the specs world, makes colliders from the specs world, thinks the parameters, does a step, and then gets the bodies back and copies us back the values. These things are all come from specs physics, and I'm very grateful of that. So I've made this class, and it doesn't do much yet. And I've got I've just shown you this prepare physics function. Here we go. And it knows these storages. Yes, Adawani, are you thinking of the synchronization topic or the physics topic or some other thing? So you got the ships, the positions, and the bodies. What we want to do is we want to apply forces to the bodies. I actually don't know how to do that yet. I'm going to be looking at the docs in a second. But we've added another thing, which is the input. So remember how I got the actor input? And so we want to get the actor input, and so here again, we don't need to modify the actor input here, we just want to read it. So we're going to add a read storage, and it's going to be the actor input class. Synchronization is a big topic. And to add insult to injury, there's a lot of decisions to make there that I want to prove out. So when we talk about prototypes, to me, synchronization and the core loop being fun, those are the two things I need to prove in my prototype. The core loop is get asteroids, build your ship, right? Get more asteroids, build your ship some more. That has to be fun. And so once I've proven those two things, and also proven the other thing, which is I can release a game. So I'm hoping to release it as like a space race of some kind. First, maybe who's the first person who can collect a set of asteroids. Later on, can you get to a certain point where you pay money to use your warp drive in form of resources? Those games will be, get us out. Yes, that's right. So the client must be as dumb as possible, and the server must be the actual brain. It's true and false, but you only trust the server. You do not trust the client. The client needs to be smart enough. Yeah, the client probably, you could say, it needs to be dumb as possible, but smart enough to save lots of data and hide latency. And one thing I'm trying to do as an innovation in my game is make it so the server doesn't need to know about the entire world. The server only needs to know about one sector, and the game world is made up of many sectors, and players can fly their ship from one sector to another. And so that means that you can have lots and lots of players online, but each sector is small enough and simple enough that a single server can simulate it. And if not, it should be theoretically possible based on the data structures to actually have multiple servers all simulating the same sector. There's another nice idea floating around on a Discord server to put a proxy between the clients and the state, so we end up with one computer that's talking to all the clients and one computer that's managing the world, which could also be an optimization. That's pretty cool. Okay. we got the actor input. I need to know how to apply a force to a physics body. In that case, preventing cheaters will be damn hard then. I'm sorry, Ardawani, in the case of the game design I'm specifying, it's actually impossible to cheat. So, you know, if you could specify a specific instance of cheating, then I could tell you why that's not possible, but it's just too big a topic to explain them all. Write storage. It's worth noting that all the servers will be controlled by me. That's why it's an MMO as opposed to a bunch of dedicated servers. So if you have a bunch of dedicated servers, you need to trust the operators, or they need to trust each other, basically. Write storage. Read storage. Actor input. I mean, part of it is I've oversimplified the design. I haven't told you everything there is to know. So there are things that I've thought of more. I know that I can fill it out. I can fill the details with something that's possible. Not that it's always easy, just that it's possible. Okay, function prepare physics takes the tuple. The tuple has this type, includes the actor input. I need to know how to use a physics body to add forces. So here's a physics body. Check external force, apply external force. To rigid body description, apply to physics world, update from physics world, drain external forces. Great. Apply external force. That's what we want to do. So the external force, you specify a linear and an angular force. So we want to specify both of those things based on the input. So here we are back here. So we got, in order to go through all the inputs, pardon if I cough in you, by the way. So for ship inputs in bodies, let's call this body. For body input in bodies, and we need to take a mutable reference here. And that means we need to specify that this is mutable here as well. In mutable bodies and in inputs, actor inputs, dot join. So this function is going to find all the entities that have both a physics body and an actor input. It's going to return references to those, and body is going to be a mutable reference, and it's going to loop over them for me. The next thing I'm going to do is use body dot apply external force. That force is going to be, we're just going to call it force, right? So let's make the force. Let force equal. Now if we look at this, apply external force. This is not working because the let statement is not compiling. Let's go back into here. Why won't let me go in? Okay, so it doesn't understand what's going on yet. I want to know how to make a force. So we make a force 3 out of 2 vectors. From slice, from vector, with a torque. Torque from a vector. Torque at a certain point. Torque from a vector at a point. So this would be doing if we're like using engines and doing it realistically, would create a whole bunch of like forces from each engine, but I'm not doing that. Linear at point. Angular vector. That returns it. Okay. So new looks like the right choice. Now I'm going to have to make some educated guesses as to how this works, and we're going to have a look and see how this goes. So I'm pretty sure this is a y up well, just like Godot, as in the y-axis is pointing up out of the top of the spaceship, and then the X and Z axes are the movement of the ship. So let's just say the linear force, let linear equal, and it's a vector 3, hopefully the right kind of vector 3, new, and I want to populate the X using inputs dot lateral X and 0.0. I don't want the player to be able to move the ship up and down yet, and inputs dot lateral Y. So we're going to put a Y on the Z axis there. Let rotational, did they call it angular? Where are we? I'm sorry, I'm getting confused. Yes, they called it angular. Making another vector 3. In this case, we want to rotate it around the y-axis. So that's the axis which is passing through the middle of the ship. We want to rotate it around the point in the middle of the ship. So one thing that's interesting about this game at the moment is that you can build the ship in any direction you want. And so we need to move the middle later on to actually be in the middle of the ship when we're doing this calculation. At the moment, we're not doing that. So as you build your ship to be a really odd, weird shape, its rotation is going to look really weird. You know what? I don't care. I'm going to ignore it right now. So we're going to use inputs. We're going to use rotation. Now, my guess is that the ship's going to move really slowly. So we're going to increase this by 5 and this by 5. Oh, but this is a per frame thing. We're doing this every frame. Oh, but we're doing the right delta. That's the translated, means I don't care, we'll find out what happens when this goes. And it's probably going to rotate too fast, and it's probably going to move too slow. We want to create a force. 3, new, with a linear, and then the angular. So prepare physics is called on the world. First we synchronize all the bodies and colliders and perimeters, and then we prepare physics, and then we do a step. I wonder if adding forces should be done. I might be adding a 1 frame latency by doing the inputs here as opposed to doing the inputs here. I don't know. We'll figure that out. This is something we'll probably later on want to bring the frame rate right down and then do some testing to figure that out. Best way to figure that out would be to do unit tests. If I did some unit tests, I'd very quickly find out whether we've got a 1 frame delay on this or not. I'm not going to do that for you now because everyone's dying to see the buttons move the ship. I know I am dying to see that. It's not going to compile. Let's watch it not compile. Run the server. The server has the same code for this as the client. So once the server compiles, the client should compile as well. So my hotkeys aren't working. Button mask doesn't know how to do AND. Okay, that's easy enough to fix. We go to button mask. We need to add another one of these for AND. This is what manages the buttons that the user is pressing. I have decided for my own sanity to wrap a U32 to force people into types. This is getting a bit annoying, having to define all these types here. I think it's outlived its usefulness actually. So let's just say that this isn't a struct anymore, this is a type. Button mask is equal to a U32. And I think you'll probably find that all this doesn't compile. I no longer need this. And I no longer need any of those. I'm not super keen on removing those. But then again, do I care? No, not really. So, Going to find button mask with an open bracket. Going to replace it with just an open bracket. Replace. And here. There'll be less of those. When we found the first ship, what was the problem? There's no implementation of first here. Do I need to make an iterator first? Do I need to call into iterate? I'm not sure. Okay, let's try into iter. There's one there. Once we've got that, doesn't find an instance of first. So join iter doesn't have first. How does that work? That's because all iterators should have something like a first, unless I've stuffed up my memory here. Let's have a look in iterator. Oh, look, it's white. Okay, I wasn't wrong was probably head. It would take. Maybe next we'll do this. See, last is there. Nth is there. Step by. I was looking for the word nth again to see if it, because usually when they say it's the same as nth, right? Okay, so instead of saying first, I need to say nth 0. That'll get the first ship. I'll move this documentation so I can see you guys chatting. Okay, cannot subtract a signed float from a fixed float. So it's complaining that we're using a proportional float. The proportional float we have to use from int. Wish there was an easier way to do this. It's kind of annoying. And it might be that I've missed some detail that makes this really easy. But I have to basically go like fixed proportion and then go from float. I have to do this on all of my constants. It's getting a bit annoying. So I have to make lots and lots of red lines for a moment. The trait bound mute is not satisfied. What is this trait bound that you speak of? I'm going to put this on the other side so that you guys can, and make it a height that where I won't accidentally work with code you can't see. And then let us proceed with this. What am I thinking here? Yeah. Reset. Okay, so I need to dereference a default, or I might need to specify that I want an actor input default. Yeah, actor input default, let's try that. It doesn't want to move it. Oh, I see. It's saying that I need to use star self in order to do this. This is me resetting the inputs using, yeah, you can see what I'm doing. You can just read the code. I'm trying to reset everything back to the defaults by assigning the default values straight in. Remember that constant problem? I need same problem here. So I need to use that fixed proportion from float, but I can't do that. I need to actually increase the, I can't just do that because I need to increase the precision of this float. This is where I need to look at the fixed documentation, because this is something I read about but haven't done before, which is changing the accuracy of the fixed value. Vector 3s are F32s anyway, so I essentially want to turn that fixed value back into a float here. It might sound silly to do that, but actually we've saved some memory space by doing that. We've kind of compressed the value in and expanded it. I know it sounds really silly because it is really silly, but we have done that. So at least there's a small side benefit, not that it really matters. Probably still would be faster not to have done that, because loading a value into the register and then copy across to float does actually cost special hardware. Okay. It's not expecting to consume the false 3, it's expecting to get a reference to it. Which seems pretty ridiculous, really. Because most of the time you're putting a false into something like this, you don't need it again, and the values are not hard to clone. So it's wasteful to take a reference, in my opinion. But that comment's also irrelevant, because Rust will fix it for you in the compiler, really. What have I missed? I don't use any other search engine. Adwani. I use DuckDuckGo exclusively. I also use a plugin called uMatrix and another one called uBlock and DuckDuckGo Privacy Essentials. So basically, I only get the parts of the page I want. But you know, I'm still not free with Google because I use YouTube, so go figure. Type annotations required. Cannot resolve to fix sealed float. Okay, so I can't figure out what kind of vector 3 I want, or here, but I obviously want the F32 version of vector 3. So if I look at vector 3, it takes an N. So I'm going to specify here that I want an F32 version, but I don't just want an F32 version. I want the same type of space state base. It's the same as this F32 here. I think I can specify here that we've got a function that takes a template parameter type T, which is we'll put N, which is a real field. I'm not sure if I can specify it there or if I specify it somewhere else. Or I just specify it straight here in the function. Probably do specify it there. And that this takes type N, and that the vector is also of type N, like this. And then that will mean that when I'm doing this constructor, we know which kind of float we want. Expected a type parameter. Found a floating point number. Ugh. Yeah, so templating this creates more problems. Okay, so we're not going to do that. Going to go from N back to F32 and write it manually here and write it manually here. Yeah, this stuff's all good fun. Can I resolve underscore for the sealed float? I'm sorry, I'm a bit lost with that one. I'm going to go back to the fixed documentation. Fix your Rust. It's kind of annoying using a language that's named after an all physical process for which someone's already made a computer game. It's like you use so many false hits. So here's how I use toFixed. Okay, so I don't want toFixed, I want fromFixed. So when I say to float, I'm getting that wrong. I'm supposed to say from fixed as opposed to from float. I'm supposed to say F32 from fixed. If. Okay. So we're supposed to do that and put that in brackets. That being a call to from fixed. And does it work over here as well? And we'll see if that error goes away. I'm still not an expert in this whole fixed array, fixed bit array that I was specifying earlier. Okay, so it's really interesting how I had to do it at the top here, but I didn't have to do it in the other vector where I've only got one of them. Maybe it's the multiplication by the float that's making life difficult. Maybe it can't figure out what type it should be. Okay, so this this here is a specs error. It can't find a particular resource. The reason why it can't find a particular resource is because I added something. And we all know that we just added a new type of component. But I forgot to actually tell specs that I wanted to store that component. So it had to create that vector I specified earlier. It hasn't created that because I never told it that I wanted one. So in here, when I build the world, as well as registering spaceship, I also need to register actor input. So that the world knows that I need to store those. Okay, so the server's running. Let's run the game. It'll be really amazing if this works. It's building, it's building, it's building. And it failed. And the reason why it failed is because I fixed that thing with button mask. So those two instances of button mask need to be removed from Star World link. Actually, one of them is in, yeah. That's the first one there. I don't need that there anymore. And the other one was inside of the helper mod file. This one here is no longer needed. So this is just because I was using a U32 like wrapped in a structure to try and like force me to always use button masks without the button masks to try and be really cool. But it was just having such a headache, it wasn't worth the trouble. So I just restarted the server. I don't know why I did that. Just pushing Control F5. It's compiling. It was fast to compile because the simulation was rerunning. Here we go. Let's click on this. Nothing seems to happen. Okay, I can see this is shimmering just slightly, like it's moving. So I can see that my input is having an effect on this particular ship. So, can you see it moving slightly? Yep. So that's supposed to be... Okay, so I've just realized it's supposed to be strafing right. Okay. That's pretty cool. So, we know, as I said, that my effects on this world way too small. But still, they're there. So, I'll stop that. Stop it. And quit. I just noticed that action is still dumping stuff on here, so I want to get rid of that much. I don't need that much output. Space. That was really cool. That was working. World update, space state is the one. So remember I said that I thought that these forces would not be high enough? Well, I was right. We probably need to find some better way of writing these constants in, but I was going to write them in here for now. So thrust, we're going to call thrust is going to be an F32, and it's currently set to 5. I'm going to try setting it to 100 because it's just fun to go fast. And we're going to set rotation. So it's currently set to 0. We'll start with 100 for that as well. Okay, so when the player input is being pushed, we're going to set thrust to 100. Now, I have realized that I need to, in order for this to work, I need to multiply the linear force by the angular force, by the angular location, before I apply it to the ship. I need to transform that linear force so that when the ship turns, my axis of input has changed too. I haven't done that yet. It's all based on the world. So as I rotate the ship, it's going to ignore me and it's going to keep flying sideways, which is wrong. But it's fun. Let's try it out. Okay, so now that I'm multiplying this by some other float, we have the same problem that we had before. That 2 float does not work. It doesn't know what the type of that constant is. Well, it does actually, because it's defined above as a constant. So it's really odd. It's a really odd error message. I don't like it. So we have to do it this other way. That's the server starting. Let's start the game again. Let's start the game twice. So these are loading. So I've got that one and this one. This one doesn't seem to have initialized properly for some reason. Like, we've already seen the not initialized problem. I'm just going to run the game again. That one initialized properly. Okay. So we're going to look at this. This is the particular ship that I'm interested in here. That's the one I'm about to move. I haven't tried to move it yet. You guys ready? Okay. It's trying to turn it. Nothing is happening. Trying to move it so-called forward. You notice how it's moving on both screens? I'm applying a force in the opposite direction now. So even 100 isn't enough force. It's taking a while to stop. Coming back. And if I let go, it's going to keep drifting. So applying a force in the opposite direction. So that was me pushing S and W, which are the up and down buttons. So let's try A, which is to the left on my keyboard. A doesn't seem to be doing anything. Interesting. And D. So those are the rotation keys, and then the strafe keys are Q and E. So here's Q, that's to the left. And E comes back the other way. I wonder if somehow those angular ones, that they work together. Like, in order to get thrust, I might need to... can I stop the ship now? Can I zero it out? Because there's nothing that's causing it to zero out by itself. There's no drag. I wonder if I need to rotate at the same time as applying a force for it to actually turn. Yeah, I need to figure out what makes it turn. It should actually, if I fly one into the other, they should indeed crash. So let's quit this demo real quick. And the reason why is because I think it's time for us to spend our asteroids and get another engine upgrade. So let's pump the thrust up again. 1000. Run the server. Run the games. It's a very good chance that when we crash, the games are going to diverge quite wildly. The only reason why they're the same is because both of these two game screens are doing the same thing at the same time, twice. But it might be that for some reason or another they're very slightly different. It's also possible that one ship's going to float above the other. That'll be interesting. So it's nice to have a slightly more powerful ship. Here we go. So I made the collider, it's just in the middle. It's just the middle of the ship as the collider. And so as a result, I just need to follow this down so I can pilot it back. Only right in the very center is what's going to collide. But, you know, that's just a proof of concept, right? This is very hard to fly because the axes that you see, okay, that'll be pushing down, up, and then this way, goes that way. This is going back. Oh, I'm pushing the wrong button, that's what's going wrong. Okay, here we go. Let's do it again. Ah, it's going too fast. I can't move the camera any further. Ah. Ah. I would just let that one go. I think it's on its way. I think we're good. I'm happy to just leave it at that. Okay. So I think having passed midnight local time, I'm pretty happy with that definition. With that. Okay. So before I go, I'm just going to quickly answer Adwani's question, which is the collider defines, where do they come from? Ultimately, they come from the full definition that the player has filled in. So the server does actually know where the collider should be, and I've written code to create the colliders. I just haven't hooked it in yet. So next time we stream, I'll hook it in. It shouldn't take very long to do. But let me show you how we create the current one. I'm just reading this to check that I haven't got it already written in here. So I will be adding the code like next stream. I'll be adding in this function to copy the collider across. Where did I put it? I put it in space. Remember I showed you where we manufacture a spaceship? And here we create a collider. So that to tell the collider builder to create one cuboid. And that cuboid is 2 units in X. And it extends upwards 2 units. And it's also 1 unit in Y or Z, right? That third one's called Z, but to me it's the Y-axis that goes up and down that way. And so I've actually written code that creates all the colliders required based on what the floor is doing. And so soon we will be modifying it so that when you change the floor, it changes the physics collider at the time. And then the ships will have the correct collider and they'll just overlap by the walls. And then we'll need to also extend that slightly. Sets the max speed, yes, that's right. The way that the ships work in Arcade is that they climb to you're not setting a force so much as you're setting a current desired velocity, and the current desired velocity is capped. So when you push the button and you hold it down, you're trying to accelerate towards a desire, and as soon as you let go, it should stop. And that's the kind of physics I'm looking for in this game. It's not realistic physics; it's arcade space physics, because I want everything I can do to maximize fun. I don't care about realism. And we could say that it's realistic because we're using some sort of gravity-based engines, or somebody set a global speed limit on spaceships, right? We can change the plot to make it make sense, but ultimately my goal is fun first, not physics, right? Physics is there for just a bit of realism and a bit of doing stuff, so I don't have to bother. Mostly I'm interested in the colliders. Anyway, that was really great progress. So what we did today is we got the inputs from the player, we got the buttons from the bindings. We synchronized that to the server using my current channel for sending actions to and from the server. We took the inputs and we interpreted them into commands for the ship using the actor input. Then what we did was we interpreted that into thrust. I haven't got the rotation working, but that's just a matter of figuring out how to rotate using this physics engine. And I've talked you through a whole bunch of stuff. So next time we're going to update the colliders, we're going to add in rotation. I need to start synchronizing when a client joins to specify where the ships are to start off with, which can also be used to keep the clients in sync over time if they drift apart in terms of their interpretation of what's going on. So follow me on Twitter or read more of my articles online. Google Recall Singularity. I really appreciate you dropping by, and this will all be on YouTube shortly. It takes a while to process, but I'll upload it. Feel free to view other streams. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Bye, and here we go. Let me click the big button that says stop. Bye, everyone.